Morning, YouTubers. It is February 2nd. The last couple videos I made, I was touring my Synergetics on the web, and then this morning I woke up thinking, gee, let's do more of that, let's do a deep dive. But then I found that Synergetics on the web wasn't working. I got a server error, and that's probably still the case. And I called GoDaddy, which hosts the thing, and it's like, hey, what's going on? And they said they fixed it. They did a reboot, but there's the service unavailable, right? It's still there. They said 15, 20 minutes. The change was percolating through the web, whatever. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. If I go down to the Synergetics level, still service unavailable. Let's drill down a little bit deeper, because I was finding that some of my static web pages from the 90s, deep down inside, were actually coming up. But no, they're not coming up either. Let's try Genie 1. Genie 1, that was working earlier. Like after he said they'd rebooted it and things were starting to work, I did get it to sort of work a little bit on a couple of my web pages, like here's one. So while I have access to this page, let's go through it just quick. This was a large event in San Francisco, not San Francisco, San Diego in 1995, and the goal here was to celebrate Fuller's 100th birthday. He was born in 1895. So we're talking about 100 years. And so there was a lot of exhibits, a lot of stuff going on all over San Diego. And I had a wonderful time there. Aside from forgetting to get dinner for my wife, I went out with one of the other conferees there, and Tara and Dawn stayed at the hotel, and I forgot to bring back the Thai food that she was really craving. So dumb. Anyway, let's see if this picture gets any bigger. Balboa Park is beautiful if you've been to San Diego. And we had domes set up. I'm going through this slow enough that I can actually take screenshots. I don't know if I really trust now this website to stay around. Now that it's important, maybe it'll just disappear. So Bucky, let's talk about. He had a huge career. There was the car chapter, then before the dome there was a huge chapter about housing, shelter, and so on that didn't have to do with domes. It's helicopter delivered skyscrapers or dirigibles. Like the early days, he was all about tension versus compression. How you can, when it comes to a really big bridge, you want a suspension bridge. When it comes to a really big dome, actually there's a lot of tension in there. Compression is less efficient and so forth. So he was caught up in all these studies, and this was after his near suicide in like 27 when he lost his first daughter and so on. And things were not coming together for him in Chicago. It was kind of a nasty period in his life, and he didn't really see where it was going to go. But okay, so that was the pit of where he felt like a failure. After that, though, he was doing pretty good in terms of recognition over time. In terms of accomplishments, all the degrees, honorary degrees, I don't think of honorary degrees as like trivial, because that's when an academic institution takes like its top degree, like its doctorate, and sort of pegs its value, gives it for free to somebody. Someone doesn't have to like pay all that money, so that costs them in a way. They're like, okay, this is what we recognize as high performant person. So, and he got like lots of those, and he got to go around the world a lot and so on. So I don't really get the picture that he was a failure. And yet when Wall Street Journal or somebody, when you have to write about him because he's in a museum or something, a new exhibit, it's always this sort of violins and poor Bucky the failure. Don't know where that comes from, because it's, compared to any of the people writing about him, he's got more credentials and awards than they do, unless they have like 5 Pulitzer Prizes. I don't know. Seems to me like he's the opposite of a failure, but I think what's going on here is they're talking about how humanity's still messed up and the planet is like gosh, are we going to make it and all that. And he was trying to help us pull out of a nosedive, or however you want to put it. And we can blame it on him if the world's still messed up, but I don't think that's really fair. Why blame him? He was a tremendous success, and he showed a way forward. Now, if we still screw up, well, that's not his fault. It has nothing to do with him, so I don't really get it. So there's that. Let's try, just in case they were not full of it there, and see if any other of my pages have come back. I'll try the volumes again, and then we'll try looking more at the domes and the history of the domes. So that was a major conference, and I injected a cartoon into it, the same cartoon that is currently, whoa, that came up. Let's see if my front page comes up, because I have something to say about that. Grunch.net. Hello, is it going to come up? Yes, all right. So, and there should be a YouTube. There we go. Richard Hawkins. I'm going to actually, I'm going to play this a little bit. I hear music. I don't know if you guys do, but it's a little choppy. So I'm going to turn off the sound and let that play in the background. So Richard Hawkins and I, we never met. We never communicated by voice. We always just sent emails back and forth. But he made this cool Clocktet video. And the theme there is the difference between 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock, because 3 o'clock is a right angle, and that's where we get our cube and so forth. So here comes the cube. And Richard did all these graphics and set it to music. My only role was to send narrations of how we could do scenarios, like how we could. It was my early Hypertunes concept. He was good enough to help me bring that to fruition. So you saw there how the 60-degree angle gave birth to the tetrahedron. 90 degrees helps us get an octahedron, and so on. This is a very cool video, and I got it into the Balboa Park lineup where they were showing a biography of Bucky Fuller. His son-in-law was a famous movie director, so there was a couple of good movies about Bucky in his lifetime. And then after he died, there was more, of course. A lot of them, like I say, they take this odd kind of maudlin approach that he was a failure in some way, which makes no sense to me. He's one of the more successful people to ever walk the planet, in my view, in terms of getting the work done, in terms of what he managed to accomplish. So let me dive into volumes on that topic of what he managed to accomplish. How many people revise how we look at polyhedrons? I mean, that's been a deeply explored, highly service unavailable. Okay, so let's try. See, that's not the problem. I gave the wrong route. So I don't know why service unavailable would be the answer. It's like that URL should not exist. This one does. But that wasn't the problem earlier. So big breakthrough, in my view, to get all the polyhedra lined up in this way with whole number volumes. And it's not a trivial thing, because of other YouTubes you'll see of mine, if you want to look, how he preserves a simple edge number for the tetrahedron. It's either 2 radii or 1 diameter, and yet the volume of that tetrahedron is 1. And how we get away with that, and how that ripples through geometry and creates another paradigm, that's huge, I think. And yet you're going to look in schools and papers, and nobody gives a damn. So what? So what? You got these whole number volumes. Yeah, we could teach kids that, but why bother? Who cares? Who cares? So that's kind of the attitude. But that doesn't make Bucky a failure. That means we're kind of doofy, right? So then what else? Another page on these. I have a part 2, I thought. Part 2, here we go. See if that comes up. So this is what we call the concentric hierarchy, and a lot of what I do in synergetics relates to this, what I call the Sesame Street of synergetics. It includes the so-called jitterbug transformation, with which the International Mathematicians Union talks about. It's not like this is not unknown math. It's well known by this time, except when you start getting to the obscure terminology and the use of things like A, B, T, S module. There's an unwillingness to go there, because if you let Fuller's terminology percolate into your your castle keep, it feels like subversion, infiltration. It's like not invented here, right? It's kind of like the architects in Bucky. They really don't like the dome in a lot of ways because it was a big breakthrough. And this thing about domes leak, there is a funny story on that. In that Jay Baldwin, towards the end of his life, he was coming up with, I think, a good narrative, which is as the renegade hippie, whole earth catalog kind of guy, he was quick to get the dome data out from NASA, and where they were taking it very seriously at NASA, the dome and so forth, still do, as what to put on Mars or the moon or whatever. So Joe Clinton, who's a friend of Jay's, Jay Baldwin, was doing all the number crunching, and he's a super expert on all the different kinds of domes, classes of domes, ways to do domes, Joe Clinton. And Jay says he like snuck into Joe's office and got the numbers out and put them in the dome maker's handbook or dome handbook, whatever it was called. And he was doing that for the hippies who wanted to drop out off the grid and get away from, vicious wars and stop being puppets of, the Uber bosses. Get out of there. Go live on the land. And that wasn't really Fuller's vision, that we would all have to sort of escape to the boondocks in order to avoid military misconceptions or whatever, in order to get away from the abortions of all these lives that we call war. There was this movement to build a dome and get away from that. And Joe Clinton, he represents kind of the establishment in this story. He's just trying to help NASA get to the moon, right? And that's not really true, but I'm just saying Jay Baldwin was casting himself as the renegade hippie, subversive, anti-establishment type who got the numbers out a little too early, and that's why domes leaked, so-called. There's a lot of, as soon as you start mentioning domes, a lot of people will say, well, they leaked. That's folk tale, right? I mean, yeah, some of them did. Any kind of house, especially a new kind. But what Fuller was working on, as you know, and I have a YouTube on this, it's kind of fun. He was working on mass-produced housing. So let's see. Let's go to Dome Hist HTML. I think that's under domes. This seems to be working better. Thank you, GoDaddy, if that's true. Let's go to dome history. So I acknowledge and did right from the beginning, right up front, that Walter Bauersfeld was on the track of geodesic domes with his planetarium. And the whole idea of planetariums and domes, hey, they go together. Joe Clinton knows that as well as anybody. No problem acknowledging other people were into getting, this was going to be a breakthrough, we hoped, for human civilization. Alexander Graham Bell was into the octet truss before or in parallel with Bucky. There's no reason to say that because someone else was into it, that puts a pall over the Bucky stuff. It's like, oh, it wasn't 100% original. Of course not. The zeitgeist, duh. Big ideas, they well up everywhere, like television, radio. Everybody wants to do that. And what the stupid people do is they pick one person and they say, you get all the fame and glory, because we're too narrow-minded to have a broad picture of the world, and we just need a simple narrative where you invented radio and you invented the dome and you get the credit and the glory, so then we can control the story and we don't have to worry about a big complicated story, because we're really kind of not smart enough to follow a complicated story, because we write newspapers and we just need a simple, the inventor of the dome, oh wait, he kind of lied because anyway, dumb, right? Dumb. So then Jay Baldwin comes along with Bucky Works much later, very good book, kind of more future oriented. And I want to talk about Joe Moore here for a sec. He did a lot of very cool, simple, hand-drawn art that made it right to the point. These started coming up pretty soon after Fuller died. We started getting these Joe Moore pictures, which were delightful, and they were part of his website. And he had collected stuff on Bucky his whole life, and when he felt unable to maintain it anymore, he gifted that to Synchronophile and to Trevor. who is a professional. He knows his stuff. So that was a very good move by Joe. And in terms of having, Fuller's stuff well archived and in a good state for further study, I feel that's been done. I'm not pointing to my website when I say that. I mean, I'm part of that, but we've got his papers at Stanford and lots of cool. Now my site though is important, so I do go through it here slowly. So some of you with high-tech equipment, you can actually take this web page and scan it and get the full text in case somebody takes out my website. At least I've got the YouTube, something like that. So this is a slow backup here where I'm doing more talk on Project Renaissance. This is public-private partnerships. There's a layer in sort of political discourse where we talked a lot more intelligently about those public-private partnerships and how they might assist us in doing what's called the design science revolution. Now, what actually happened was the open source revolution, or what we call Revolution OS, which can stand for operating system as well. I like the link to OSS in terms of anti-fascism, even though open source software OSS is a whole different acronym. I think we did sort of continue in that vein. I want to end with my the icon's gone, but this appeared several places, not just in my publication. It's kind of an early manifesto of mine. We're going back to 1995, quite a while back. The web was young, and I'm talking about general systems theory. I'm basically talking about the same ideas as I talked about in my previous video, which I will end with here. Do go look through my website, grunch.net, Synergetics, all kinds of stuff. There's a whole separate section on Kenneth Snelson, who did tensegrity sculptures. Where is my tensegrity sculpture? I'd like to show it to you guys. Here it is. This was a gift from Kenneth, which I like to share with folks, and I did his first website. That's partly why he gave me a sculpture. But we used to hang out. I used to go and visit him in New York City. Now, I didn't live in New York City, so it wasn't like I got to see him very often, but we did hang out. So that's at my website also, and there's more to be said about all this history, but let's do it in chunks, not all at once. So I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.